Hello, world. Welcome to the Innovation Coaching Podcast. My name is Klaus Hostel, and with me today I have Alejandra Matelana. Now, I know I butchered that, but Alejandra, how can I help?
Well, I'm thinking a lot of things around how to foster an innovation mindset in my work and with others. And I've always been very passionate about creativity mindset and how to train creativity and innovation with the people I work with. And right now, I'm struggling a bit with how can I prove to leadership and how can I do tests or experiments that demonstrate that actually working with innovation tools, resources, methodologies, or creative tools as well can actually improve performance of teams. So that's kind of where I'm in right now.
Got it. Okay, interesting. So, one of the things, if I understand you correctly, is that you're trying to convince some people higher up in the hierarchy that this is a good idea, and you're a little bit in doubt about how do you do that.
Exactly.
So, one of the first things is that whether we like it or not, we live in a world ruled by numbers. Numbers are safe, numbers are nice, numbers are easy to justify. If it gives plus 13% on something, then we're more likely to go, ooh, that's a good idea. If it gives plus 13% on something we care about, then it's even better. If it gives plus 13% on the bottom line, ooh, then it's usually very easy to convince people to do things. Now, the first question is, how are you measuring right now? Or how are you showing this right now?
hmm right now, it's been very, like, I've taken a very qualitative approach. It was just, so it started out of curiosity and out of my own proactivity. So I started doing coffee chats with people. I had more than 13 with inside the company and also outside. And then I yeah, I did like the whole analysis of what's the pattern and how many people did say yes or no, but it's been qualitative right now. So I don't have like a structure and a big case where I say these are the numbers and this is how we grow or not. So that's actually also something that I think it's linked to it. How can I define the KPIs to start measuring the process?
Mm-hmm. So the first thing about KPIs, and for those out there who don't deal with KPIs, we're talking about key performance indicators, which are things you look at to say, how is it going? If you're, yes, there's obvious stuff like, do you have any customers? Is there any money? Have you blown up the factory? That sort of thing. But also, like, what are things we can look at that can show how well is it going? And if a key performance indicator is kind of if you have bad numbers, then it's not good. And if you have good numbers, it is good. But it's something that if you know that number, then it's easier to know something about the overall, a lot of complexity. So it's basically finding a simpler way to look at complexity. So I think a first question is, what KPIs do your bosses care about?
Mm.
Because if you're saying, when doing these workshops, the people in my department run 10% faster, and they say, yes, but this is a phone support operation, Alejandra, then that might not help a lot. So what do they care about? What are they, apart from everybody's trying to keep the business afloat and do the mission, but what do your bosses care about?
Very good question. So I think there are many different interests. It also depends who you talk to.
It's never easy in big organizations.
Yes. But I think I would reflect on our own objectives of the department, right? So
Mm-hmm.
what is it that we're trying to achieve there? We're trying to improve the for example, experiences, or yeah, the experience we give to our consumers, or also caring for people inside. That I think that is something that also innovation can help with, like the taking care of people. And yeah, other specifics that I think that are more confidential, but I think that experience can be an umbrella of many other things, like improving processes, knowing better our consumer, um, being more future and forward thinking than just focusing on the current. So those three, and also then caring for people and their growth path.
And those are all a little bit fluffy, right? A little bit soft. And the thing about that is that while we all deal with that, at the end of the day, everything's built on soft, fluffy stuff. It's also harder the higher up you get in the management chain often to justify the fluffy stuff. It's easier if there's numbers, which is why a lot of, and you said about measurement, that if there's a way you can make the fluffy a bit less fluffy, that makes it easier to understand. I don't know how, have you played a lot of computer games, for example? Yes. One of the things computer games do exceptionally well, especially these like manager games, like Football Manager and that sort of thing, is they take abstract stuff and they turn it into numbers. So they take David Beckham, famous football player, brilliant, blah, blah, blah. And they say David Beckham has a corner ability of 19 out of 20. It cannot be much better. They say David Beckham has sprinting of 13 out of 20 and stamina of 15 out of 20 and heading, blah, blah, blah. They take all these abstract things that make a football player, one of them better than another, and they turn them into numbers.
Yeah.
So, and it means for something like Football Manager, if every player has like 30 different things like heading and aggressiveness and tackling and all this sort of stuff, and they all have numbers, it means for huge complexity that's handled by the number crunching computer that leads to actually playing the game. Where that complexity, that way of thinking as a computer game, can be pretty smart when you're trying to make something soft data into hard data. So if you're telling your people, rate from a 1 to 5 how motivated you feel because of the environment, physical environment. And if they all give you, like, they come back, you end up with a 3.2, and then you put in some plants and some bird music and a little bit of soft rugs, and then you ask them again, and then they rate it 4.6. And then you can say directly, we have raised the appreciation of the work environment on a 1 to 5 scale. We went from 3.2 to 4.6. And that doesn't mean necessarily, and that's why we make $12 extra a month or that sort of thing. But it's a clear, okay, here's clear progress. And while not everybody cares about appreciation of the physical workplaces, if you can find some things that the system, or in this case, just your bosses, care about, do they care about how many meetings are held or how many emails are sent? Probably not. But they are things they do care about, where you said, what if I could give us 20% more of this? They're like, okay, tell me more. And I say, I have an idea. I want to put it into practice. And I'm first going to do a start measurement, and then I'm going to do an after, and then you're going to do shall we say, the interaction or the thing, the change, the new thing in between, and then you're going to do that. And then you can take anything as soft as it may be and turn it into harder data, because you're comparing two pieces of soft data.
Yeah.
And of course, just because somebody says, I feel more creative today, doesn't make them more creative, but it's a good place to start, right? Things like workplace trust and emotional intelligence and all that sort of thing that we know leads to better innovation cultures. We know, for example, from a lot of research, that if you have a zero error mentality, zero failure culture, that just leads to more failures. That's very well documented.
Yeah.
So if you ask your people on a scale of 1 to 10, how okay do you feel it is to fail?
Yeah.
And if you can move that number from a 1 to a 4, then you know that leads to that's a good KPI, because that leads to good innovation culture.
Yes, absolutely. And I guess there are, some metrics that are already invented, so to say. I don't have to
Yes,
invent the wheel. Yeah, to start, actually to do that start measurement. And I do think that having like a control group and another one where I can actually start working with some real projects, that's also the ideal for me, like how different things go when you apply innovation tools and methodologies or when you don't.
exactly. And a very, very simple example. This is from a friend of mine who did this as a project as part of her master's degree. She did with this museum, an art museum. And she basically did, here's like a guided experience within the museum. And then some people on a given day got the guided experience, there was like a self-guided, I can't remember, was it an audio tour or just a piece of it was simple. And they got that. And then they were at the end asked how did they like the museum rated on this scale, and how did they like a couple of things about it. Very simple. And then they tested the other people who didn't do it, they were asked the same question. And they could see that there was a huge difference between the ones that went through, that got the experience, and the ones that just went to the museum, making it very, very easy. Like even without understanding exactly what the experience was and what does it mean, they could at least see that it made a difference, and it made a big one. And I think part of what we sometimes go wrong with when we talk about culture and we talk about data is that we forget that we can measure stuff we can't measure.
Yeah.
It's hard to measure love, but
Yeah.
you can. If you ask how much do I love my daughter today, rate it on a 1 to 5. Not every day is going to be 5.
Yeah.
And then if you can say, okay, now we're going to give you a new way, of new mindset, or new toys, or new ways of being together, or new philosophy, whatever it is, new training, and then look at it afterwards and see, okay, it actually made a difference. And we still can't measure love, but we can measure, is there more of it? Do you feel more of it? And I think that sometimes is an underused way of getting innovation projects approved in especially big organizations. If you're just solo, you don't need all that. You're like, I think this is good, let me try. But
Yeah.
here you need to justify it to somebody further up who needs to justify it to somebody further up before it
Exactly.
goes. And making those micro experiments and thinking of ways to measure them, even if it's slightly fluffy stuff, can make that much, much easier.
Mhm. Agreed. Yeah, completely. And I think I'm in a good position to start doing it. Um, so yeah, I will start looking into it.
So that's one thing.
Yeah.
Tell me more about this. That was the measurement side, right?
Yeah. So from this qualitative research I've done, I also started like a series of also small experiments. I call them creative pop-ups, where I'm trying to validate or to better understand how human connection fosters trust and therefore enables collective creativity.
Mm.
And I started doing it with just sitting outside the office and yeah, having prompts. It was super random, but I learned a lot. And having prompts like what changed your life, or what do you have in mind lately, or what are some challenges or obstacles that you're facing, because I wanted to understand if people would came up with things that they are facing at work, that so that we can ideate and together look for solutions. But 0 out of 8 experiments, here I have a number, have we talked about work. Every single conversation has been around life, and work comes up in terms of I don't know what to do next, or I don't know if my purpose is aligned to what I'm doing right now. But never happened that my first hypothesis about people are going to come with some challenges they have and we can ideate around them, it never happened. And I tried changing the prompt so that maybe it's more work related without it being too yeah, explicit or obvious, but it never happened. So I'm also wondering how human connection maybe is lacking, or maybe when we're giving the opportunity we start making those connections. And I'm trying to understand how that could also help innovation processes, like how important is human connection in innovation. Yeah, I don't know, it's fluffy as well at this point.
No, but still good, still interesting. So, first question, what have you tried? Just ask, say, let's talk about work.
Yes, once I tried.
How did that go?
No, they were coming back to the personal stuff, like, yeah, I maybe I could do that, but it's also because I'm feeling this or that. Like then it became again personal.
Okay, but let's take that and so if what your so far your 8 first ones show that people tend to make it personal. So there's a thing there's one of the kind of leadership trends out there about soulful organizations, one where you challenge the old paradigm of when you go to work, you are only business. You are not a person anymore. You are just a function. And we know that's not true. We know that whether you work in a factory or in consulting or teaching or whatever it is, fly airplanes, you go to work as a human being. And if you woke up that morning and your kid yelled at you, you're going to have a worse day. And if you woke up and the kid instead smiled and says, Dad, I love you, here's a hug, then you're going to be better at work. We know this, right?
Yeah.
However, we still don't necessarily embrace it, right? How often things like check-ins before meetings are becoming more popular, but it's still often this, here's work and here's personal, right? And when you say about here, like they didn't want to talk work, they just wanted to talk personal.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, well, maybe that's because the most important thing to them at work is personal stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I've also realized the same. Like, it's not machines doing this or that. It's people that they have, yeah, we're human. We're very complex. So asking people do this task is not just do this task to a computer. It's someone that maybe that task implies a lot of things emotionally, mentally, physically, whatever. So yeah, exactly. And I've always wondered as well, like, where is the line? Where is the line between what of the personal is actually allowed, quote unquote, or useful or relevant in work, and where is when is it too much? Because I think there's also a line between personal stuff and who you are, and why we should consider it, and then getting intimate and bringing things that then can complicate stuff. I don't know, like it can be very transcendent.
Yes, like you may have gotten divorced, but we still need that proposal,
Exactly.
which is it's rough, but it's still also the reality that some people face. So I think the first place to start is by doing a little bit more generally for not just you, but in general for awareness of what the personal elements are. And I'm going to jump us to Disney for a moment.
Yeah.
Have you been to Disneyland?
Yes.
Yes. In Disneyland, you can meet, and for our listeners out there, you can meet in Disneyland, you can meet these characters. People are dressed up in the Mickey Mouse costume and the Goofy costume, all these characters you can meet. Now, I read some years back an interesting one from a guy who spent 20 years or so at Disney in a park. And he said he'd been inside one of these costumes for many, 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 many times. Ask me anything. And people asked him all sorts of questions. And one that stuck with me was somebody asked him, what was the hardest thing about the costume? About
Mm.
where working that I've worked in like these monster costumes in my role-playing days. I know that you're walking around something, it's heavy, it's sweaty, you don't have good vision, you can't really hear. It's really annoying, but okay, that's part of the job. So I was curious, what about somebody who does this so much? What will he answer? And he said the hardest part was not the hot summer days where you're sweating, and it wasn't that you didn't drink. The hardest part, he said, was that when you're inside the costume, when you're inside Mickey Mouse or Goofy, part of the job is that you have to smile to kids. And most of them, that's great. Because they're kids, they're happy. And yes, it's number 100 who says, Hi, Donald, that's fine. And you smile and you think, okay, good, good. It's a mass-produced experience. And he said, that's not the hard part. The hard part is when they bring you the kid who's dying of cancer, who's 6 years old, and you can see that there's no hair and they're going to be gone soon. And they're at the front of the line because of this Make-A-Wish rule they have at Disney to give them that experience. And suddenly you have to deal with, you're at work and you're 22 and you're inside the costume, but you have to face a dying child who's getting a wish come true. And he said, doing that once, it's moving, it's touching, but it's also rough emotionally. Doing that 10 times a day, that is tough, right? And I'm sure that for most of us, when we think of work, when we think of Disneyland, we think of, oh, you're in a park and you're wearing the suit, you're wearing the Donald Duck suit. We think, oh, that must be warm, and oh, it must be, what do you do when kids hit you? And you sometimes slip in stuff, or like, I'd never have considered that until I read that.
Hmm.
That the emotional demands of being inside the Mickey Mouse suit are insane because of the situations where the Mickey Mouse suit is needed.
Yeah.
Not for most of the work, but for some of it. And that some is so hard that if you do that, it requires something of you emotionally. And I think that's just an easy example to relate to, but I think we sometimes forget to look at what does it mean, this function, or what are we doing? What's the emotional side of it? What's the psychological side of it? That is the hard part about being a phone salesperson, is the hard part picking up the phone and saying stuff. No, the hard part is dealing with rejection.
Yeah.
And that means good phone salespeople are incredibly good at dealing with rejection.
Yeah.
Bad phone salespeople, which are most of us, are not good at. It's not technical. It's not that they necessarily are more charming or more patient, or the ones who learn how to deal with rejection, they become excellent. The rest of us, we do it and then we say, no, it wasn't me, or it was too weird. I didn't like it, or I didn't like, we come up with all sorts of excuses where the reality is for most of us. And I was a phone salesperson for 6 hours. And then I realized this is not for me because I didn't like calling people and saying, hi, do you want to buy this thing? And they said, I'm not interested, click. And it was not about me at all, but it still felt like, I don't like it. And that means that if we're looking for jobs, right, if you're saying you should be a phone salesperson, we know that the job application will say you should be good at rejection.
Yeah.
Because we know that we've learned how phone salespeople work. But for a lot of jobs, we don't know. And if we know, we don't talk about it. And that, to me, that leads back to that innovation culture, that if you are creating that and people want to talk about their personal stuff, then figure out how do you use that to your advantage, or how do you make it possible? Like when they're talking about, oh, this and this, how do you make that part of it, instead of saying, don't tell me about your divorce, I want to hear about your project.
Yeah.
Right? How do you make that relevant to the work you're doing?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and what I've realized is actually there are topics that are not so far away of what they're doing, right? So growth, like I don't feel like in growth here, and that's an issue, and that is preventing me of giving my best.
Exactly. And then you're suddenly saying, how can we help? What does growth look like for you? And if they say, well, I want my husband to be less of an annoying. Okay, we can't fix that.
Yeah.
But maybe we can fix something else. Why is he annoying? Well, he's annoying because I'm always working late on Thursdays, and there he takes the kids to the movies and he hates it. It's like, okay, so you're saying that if we change your schedule so you can leave earlier on Thursdays, you can take the kids to the movies, and you love that. I know you said that, and your husband is going to be happy and cook dinner instead. And that's going to mean you perform better. We can do that.
Yeah.
We can change your schedule. We can't change your husband, but we can change your schedule.
Exactly, those are the connections I think would be very interesting to see. Also a lot with purpose, so, or what's going on in the world. Like I'm here in my safe bubble where I cannot do anything about the world out there, but I struggle with what is happening out there.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and also that conversation was very interesting because it was like, okay, if you're not there but you're here, how do you make yourself closer knowing that you cannot actually go there
Mm-hmm.
for help? So yeah, I agree completely. And yeah, purpose in general, like am I doing what I am called to do? I think that's a question many of us ask ourselves, and it's huge. Like how do you know your purpose? But I do believe that we can connect a purpose that is, yeah, that is it's about your today, your present self, that can be connected to what you do at work.
And I think part of that we maybe, are you familiar with the old story of the stone cutter and the cathedral?
No.
Ah, and to those of you listening, some of you may know it, some of you will not. So this is a very old story. Where it's from, I couldn't find sources for it. It's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, if not more, but it exists in several formats. But the core part of it is that somebody, sometimes it's a bishop, sometimes it's a rich person, somebody comes to this quarry, this stone working place, where there are people sitting and they're working on cutting stones. And there's three guys. And the bishop, let's use the bishop for the example. The bishop talks to the boss of the place and said, "Can I talk with some of your workers?" And said, "Yeah, yeah, sure. Here's three you can talk to." And the first one is just angry and he's annoyed and he's looking tired. And the bishop can already sense that this guy hates his life, right? Or at least hates it right now. And he says, "Well, what are you doing? Why are you so angry?" He said, "Look at me. I'm cutting stones, right? I'm a stonemason. I cut stones. It's boring. It's hard work. It's like, what is there to like about that?" And the bishop's like, "Well, okay, I guess I'm happy I'm a bishop, but good point." And then he moves on. And then there's another guy a little bit further down, and he's sitting and he's got a smile on his face. And the bishop's like, "Okay, you're doing the same. Do you know that guy's like, yeah, I know that guy. Okay. So why are you not? You're doing the same thing." He says, "No, no, no, I'm not doing the same thing." He says, "But aren't you cutting stone?" He says, "No, I'm not cutting stone. I'm feeding my family."
Hmm.
"Oh, okay." He said, "Yes, it's still hard work, but it feeds my family. And it means that I'm happy when I go home. Yes, it's hard, and yes, it's not super interesting, but it feeds my family. So I'm smiling." And say, "Oh, okay, nice." And then he goes to the third guy who's sitting there and who's like, "Let me show you what I'm doing." "Okay, why do you want to show me?" Like, this guy's obviously, yes, excited and empowered and really happy. And the bishop's thinking, he's also cutting stone. What's going on here, right? Is something weird? He says, "But oh, you're feeding your family as well. You're happy yourself." "No, no, no, no. Yes, I'm feeding my family, but more importantly, I'm building a cathedral."
Hmm. Wow.
And that, of course, it's a story, right? Of course, reality isn't that simple and that perfect. But that I've been in many places in the world and I've seen many people and I've done many different projects. And some of them I've seen are people who have insane decision power and money and influence, and they still don't feel that they can do anything. They don't feel they have any motivation, or they don't feel they have any power. They feel that it's just a struggle. And then I met somebody, the weirdest I've seen was at a public toilet. Maybe it was in, where was it? Was it Poland, something? I can't even remember. It was a public toilet in a country where I didn't speak the language. And there was somebody who was like the public toilet attendant.
Yeah.
And she was just in such a good mood and she was talking to people. And it was clear that this was her kingdom.
Yeah.
And from outside, I thought, you've got a shitty job, but damn, you get the most out of it.
Yeah.
I wish I could get that much out of a job that shitty. I'm impressed by you. And of course, I didn't talk with her about it because we didn't speak the same language. And I went to the men's room, and she was obviously outside the female one. But just seeing that woman at work made me think, okay, this is the stone cutter that's building cathedrals. This is somebody who, for whatever she'd done, I don't know, but whatever she'd managed to do mentally, she just radiated kindness and fun and a good time. And she was a public bathroom attendant, right? There wasn't even a cathedral involved.
Yeah, it was a bathroom this time. But yeah, exactly. Do you think nowadays leaders should also somehow be involved in that purpose or meaning of work path? Like, is that also something that now is part of leadership skills, like being able to connect your team?
Yes, yes. And it's also weirdly enough, let's look at it differently. Not so much is it part of it and should they do it. Let's
Mm-hmm.
look at it differently, and let's instead say, why is it incredibly smart to be able to do that?
Yeah.
Because one of the parts of the story of the cathedral that we don't talk about is they all got paid the same.
Yeah.
And I have an old friend who's a researcher in volunteer work and volunteer society and volunteer community buildings. And at one point he was at a talk I was giving, or not, rather, I was at a talk he was giving. So he used me as an example and he said, "Well, Klaus here, Klaus has badly paid staff, so they're all highly motivated." And we laughed. And
Uh-huh.
then there was a moment of silence. And I said, "Yeah, that's true. Nobody at my company, this was my old company, nobody at my company was motivated by the money because there wasn't a lot of money.
Yeah.
So people only worked there if they were motivated by the mission and by the community and by the challenges and by the fun and that sort of thing. Nobody was motivated by the money because there wasn't any. right? There was very little money. And I'm saying it's not bad to be motivated by the money. That's okay. Some things you do because you want the money. But if you don't know why people are motivated, then there's the chance of you giving them the wrong thing are pretty good. So imagine that somebody comes to you, boss comes to you and says, Alejandra, I am going to make your job more shitty. It's going to become more shitty, but I'll do something to make it more okay. What can I do for you? You can choose between more money or better work times, more flexibility, or you can choose to have who is going to be your personal assistant.
Mm-hmm.
These are all things that do something. Some people say, I don't care. I just want the more money. If it's more shitty job, give me more money.
Yeah.
Some will say, you know what? More money isn't going to change it, but flexible working hours. Wow, that's valuable.
Yeah.
And somebody might say, you know what? I don't care about the hours. I don't care about the money. But if I get to work with Steven,
Yeah.
then it's fine that it's crazy, right?
Yeah.
And I come from a world of volunteer work. I spent many years in volunteer communities and have done a ton of volunteer projects. And the moment people aren't motivated by money, because they're not getting any, not just a little, just zero,
Yeah.
then you need to find other things that motivate them. Are they motivated by the people they work with? Are they motivated by the challenge they're working on, by the tools they get to use? Oh, we get to use this laser cutter from NASA.
Yeah.
Okay, what are you doing with it? I don't care. It's the laser cutter from NASA. Or are they motivated by the mission? They get to save the world a bit, even if the other stuff is, even if there's no money and no fame, or like, what is it that motivates them? And I think if we can get more people to bring that, and if leaders knowing how to motivate, well, that's one thing. Knowing how to deliver purpose, that's another. But understanding that there are different kinds of motivation, and some horses respond well to the whip, and some respond well to the carrot, and some respond well to a lighter rider.
Yeah.
Right? It's very, very different what people want. And if you're trying to get them to go places where they normally aren't, as you are in innovation work, then knowing what makes them motivated is incredibly important.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree completely. And I think that comes back again to trust and human connection. Exactly. So I don't think it is something you do from one day to the other. Because having those conversations of what motivates you or what is important for you in your life, I think that's also things that first we're not used to talk about at work, and second that is probably very vulnerable as well, like talking about or exactly or saying, look, I'm here for the money, that sometimes is not easy to say either.
No, it's not. And I think part of our what's tricky is that we ask people to be honest
Yeah.
when we don't want honesty.
Yeah.
Right. And I see that in so many industries. One of the classics is you go to an event and then you get this automated survey that says, please tell us about the event. Tell us if there's stuff you like and stuff you didn't like.
Yeah.
And then you write to them, you know what? I liked the event, but I think this was terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want to do that. Right? Most of us, we don't, because we feel that's not nice. And even worse, if somebody says, how many in this room are just here for the money? Being the first person to raise your hand,
Yeah.
that takes courage.
Totally.
Where if it's suddenly, if a leader says, hey, this is an option, and says, you know what, I'm lucky enough that now I'm in a good place and I'm motivated by this, but for 6 years I worked at this place, I hated it, but I was there for the money, and that's okay. So if any of you are here for the money and that's what motivates you most of all, let me know, because I can't make the work better. I can't make it easier. I can't even change the team, but I can give you more money. Then
Mm-hmm.
some are going to go, oh, interesting. Or the other way around, saying, I can't get you more money, but I can get you more flexibility or different choosing, or we can paint the walls, or we can have fun Fridays, or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
But saying there are different options instead of saying that believing that everybody fits the same and that everybody wants the same, because we really don't.
Yeah. Yeah, completely. I love it. I will try to be more straightforward with the work side, like can I help you anything with your work, also to see what happens there. But definitely, I believe that I'm building in those 30 minutes I play with Play-Doh with these people.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I believe I'm making really interesting connections, and people I've never talked to before open up to me as if we were friends. So
That's pretty
it's
nice.
very interesting. Yeah.
I like the Play-Doh thing. And I'm guessing even that, right? Some people will love the Play-Doh and others will think, what the?
Oh, well.
Like, seriously? Yeah, like I'm never talking to, I'm just going to give her crap answers just because of the Play-Doh, right? But I'm guessing most will love it, is my guess.
I would say most love it, and but most also start saying, "I'm so bad at this. I haven't played with this in so many years." Or yeah, the excuse of the plate is like, "Don't worry, I don't expect you to be a Play-Doh sculptor." It's very interesting.
And I think if we take that before we round off, I think that's so interesting. That deserves a bit of commentary
Yeah,
because you are working with innovation.
yeah,
And the people here are working with innovation. And when you give them something just to play with, just for fun,
yeah,
first comment is, oh, I'm not that good at that. How can you expect people to go where they haven't gone before, which is what innovation is, if a basic part of their mind says, even playing, I don't feel comfortable doing it if I'm not good at it.
yep,
That's something as innocent as play, right? Some of them probably say, oh, I get to play, how nice. And some of them maybe say, or maybe at least think, what's wrong with this woman? Can't we have a serious conversation? But the ones who say, oh, I'm not very good at it, like where does that, that is a thing that is deeply underlying, like innovation culture is getting rid of, or at least dealing with and addressing that mindset of what makes you say that. I'd i'd ask that question definitely
yeah,
if it happens again, right?
yeah.
For now though, before that happens, and I look forward to hearing how things progress, Alejandra, before we round off, I want to do two things. One is I want to thank you for your bravery and for sharing and for going on this and not just sharing your challenges in this with me, but with the world. That takes guts, that takes courage. Thank you for that. Thank you for trusting me with that and for trusting all of us with that. The second is, and this is both so we can tell our listeners, also so you can tell me, but most of all, so you can tell yourself as memory anchors. What are three things you take with you from our session today? What are three things that will stick with you from this?
I think the second part of the conversation gave me a lot to think about, and also I connect the learning of the first part to it. That is, what do my leaders care about, right? That is absolutely connected to what do people care about, why
Mm-hmm.
are they here. So I think asking those questions is key. um Also, the perspective of maybe I don't have to hide the questions that I'm trying to get answers to. Maybe I can ask straight, like, hey, are you struggling with something where I can maybe help you with? So being more explicit and obvious sometimes helps get the right answers if you need them. um and I would also say that that part of the history from Disneyland, like what is the emotional part of what we do, is also something that I want to be more aware of. Like, yes, I know we are all complex as human beings, but what you say, like maybe there are some things that we don't consider when we work with people that are key for them to feel better, to perform better, to be happier, maybe. So I also take that with me.
Thank you for those takeaways. And to all of you out there listening, you heard Alejandra Matalana and me, your host, Klaus Hoste. Thank you for listening.